So, DMT, the alleged most powerful psychedelic in the world, as some say. I think even Terence McKenna said that once upon a time. Seems to be experiencing a sort of resurgence in popularity in recent years, especially thanks to Mike Tyson. This is where things start to finally pick up the pace and get interesting in my journey down the rabbit hole into psychedelic gnosis, so to speak. As I said in the previous two trip reports, those experiences, while they were great initiatory experiences, gateway experiences into the world of psychedelics and the psychedelic experience, they didn't really give me much that helped significantly form my worldview, my views on reality and my existentialism and whatnot. But now we get into DMT, where, yeah, things were interesting. So this was in the winter of 2018. My brother had come into town and kind of dropped in on me by surprise. So we met up for dinner after my shift that day and just kind of shot the shit as we normally do, catching up. And then eventually our conversations, when they continue on long enough, he and I, we inevitably get into discussing those ideas, our worldviews, our views on reality, our views on life and the meaning of life, if there is any, and our existentialism and whatnot, and how much our views had changed since the last time we had spoken. And he was telling me that, in particular, his views were changing radically because he had been getting into psychedelics. He had told me about some experiences he had on, like LSD and mushrooms and whatnot, and DMT. So he was going to stick around in town for about a week or so. At least that was the original plan. So the next time we interacted, he's like, "Hey, so want to try it?" Basically. I had heard of DMT, of course. I'd listened to Joe Rogan, Terence McKenna, and a bunch of other psychonauts talk about it and stuff. And while it definitely piqued my curiosity, I did have intentions of like one day doing that. When I heard all these reports about it, I'm like, okay, before I die, one day I got to try that at least once, But I had also, given the armchair knowledge I had about it, I also like had this kind of sacredness about it. I guess I kind of put it on a pedestal and I attributed some kind of sacredness or holiness to it, I guess you could say. I felt like I needed to be in the right state of mind before engaging in something so potent, and I felt like I needed to cleanse myself and maybe do several months of meditation and fasting and veganism or some shit like that before engaging what I was going to assume was going to be like some really radical, life-altering experience. But this was family, and and the girl I was dating at the time, she was also there, and basically it kind of gave me the peer pressure, like, come on, don't be a pussy, go ahead and try it. All right, fuck it, why not? Again, this, chronologically speaking, this being my only my third psychedelic experience, I felt I really had to psych myself up for it. The nerves and anxiety were kind of getting me, like, I didn't really know what to expect. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to handle it and whatnot, so to kind of calm my nerves, I started mentally in my mind reciting passages from the Bhagavad Gita that I've always enjoyed, especially chapter 10 in particular, where Krishna is revealing his divinity to his disciple. I believe Arjuna was the disciple's name. And Krishna just goes down this long list of I ams, of the trees, I'm the bodhisattva tree, and of the stars, I am the sun, and going through various I am expressions like that, just kind of the gist of it at the end of the day being like, I'm one with the universe, so chill out, and, don't take anything too seriously, dust we are and to dust we shall return kind of sentiment. So I'm reciting that passage in my mind as my brother's loading up the bowl, because we just did the sandwich method, which is, you sandwich the DMT powder between two layers of marijuana herb in a bong bowl and rip it. And he instructed me, you gotta take 3 deep inhales, try to hold them for as long as possible. So I sit on the edge of the bed, and he loaded it up, but my girlfriend, or ex-girlfriend, she was the one who administered the bong to me, because she was gonna, like, in case it started to kick in before I could make that third hit, she was gonna take it away from me. Which she did, that's basically what happened. I took the first hit and could kind of start to feel a little buzz, and the second hit and feeling it, I'll say that DMT is the only chemical that the come on is very unique in that it's the only thing I would say feels like, for lack of a better word, drowning. And I don't mean that in any kind of scary sense, but it's like, or maybe baptism is a better word, but it's like being submerged. Like it starts low in your lungs, and then it just kind of, and it's a very cold sensation in my opinion. Very unique, very, and I mean cold in both levels, like temperature wise, like physically cold, but also cold as in there's like, it isn't like with a weed high or mushroom high where it kind of cradles you and receives you. This was like, all right, here we go. Hope you're ready for this. And it rises up and quickly, like, and so the sensation is comparable to like just, you know, submerging underwater. Maybe not necessarily drowning. Maybe that's a bit too extreme, but it's very like, oh wow, okay, here we go. So just be ready for that if you ever try it. I'm also going to say this, having done DMT 2 times after this experience that I'm describing to you now, I am now convinced that this initial experience that I'm about to tell you about was not an actual full-on breakthrough, as they describe it in DMT lingo. I think what I experienced was more like the waiting room, as they call it, like that in-between stage where you haven't quite fully broken through to the realm, but you're still definitely vividly tripping, and you're no longer sober in the sober reality either. And we'll just have to cross that bridge when we come to it, and when I describe in a future video my third and most recent DMT experience, why that was an actual breakthrough, and the level of intensity of that experience compared to this initial one. They're worlds apart. But anyway, so I take that second hit and like, whoa, okay, here we go. So better hurry up and get the third hit in. So maybe I made the mistake, and maybe this is why I didn't have a breakthrough, because I could already feel the come on happening in the second hit. When I took the third hit, I didn't really hold it in. I just felt that I needed to get rid of the bong and exhale quickly before I enter the trip state, because I didn't really know what was going to happen. So like I said, the ex is standing there in front of me, smiling, and I take that third hit and quickly pass her the bong and the lighter. And like I said, when you feel the sensations rising and it goes up, as it hits your, like literally rising up over your face, and it hits your eyes, it overtakes your vision that way too. Like the bottom of your vision starts to be overtaken by the chemical, and it goes in like a straight line, like a water line up over your vision, or at least it did in my experience. And what it did in that moment was it made this reality look very cartoonish. It was very, very comparable to like the movie A Scanner Darkly, that starring Keanu Reeves, based on a Philip K. Dick book. So Google that if you don't know what that movie is, and then you'll see what I'm talking about. That's what this reality looked like in that initial phase of DMT. And then, so that lasted for a few seconds, and then as that grew in intensity, and as the level finally went all the way up to the top of my scalp, and the full kick in happened, it went from looking like A Scanner Darkly, cartoonish, to just looking like fuzz on a TV screen when you can't get a channel in. And at that point, I just instinctively closed my eyes, because, I mean, why have them open if I can't see anything? And now I'm sitting on the edge of the bed in lotus posture. And I think all this is significant. You know, they say set and setting is everything, and that influences the trip. So I think having earlier recited Hindu scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita, in my mind, as well as like sitting in, you know, a traditional yoga pose, the lotus position, very much influenced the imagery I was about to see. Because as I close my eyes, I'm in a corridor, or hallway, however you want to describe it. And it is very much like right out of the movie Tron from the 80s. It was very like low budget CGI. The closest picture I've been able to find that most accurately resembles what I saw in this corridor is like this. Yeah, so it's like a black backdrop, and the walls and the floor and ceiling and everything are only made out by like lines of bright neon light. just outlines basically, not like actual full detail. Like I said, very much like low budget CGI. And then I just start floating and down this hallway, and I'm only a point of perception. Like I don't have any awareness of a body. I still have awareness of me. I definitely still had my ego intact, but physically I was just a point of vision, a point of observation, just floating down this hallway that didn't, and had I looked down and tried to look at myself, there wouldn't have been anything there. It was just this point of vision now floating down this hallway. Now where the Hindu imagery comes in is the walls of this corridor were decorated with what I can only describe as lotus flowers, like you might see in a lot of Hindu imagery or ancient Egyptian imagery. And they were closed. Again, made out of the same like outlines of bright neon blue, decorated all along the walls of this corridor as I'm floating down. And I'm floating down, and it takes several turns, like, a few rights, a few lefts. And then finally it comes to this doorway, and the doorway opens up, and I entered into this room. And the room is pretty much the same, only it's bigger. And it didn't seem quadrilateral as best I can remember. It seemed more like hexagonal or maybe octagonal. But again, black backdrop, low budget CGI kind of look to it with bright neon beams making out the outlines of the walls and the ceiling. So I enter into this room and I float into the direct center, and I just instinctively get this impression. And for those of you who aren't experienced in psychedelics, you'll find that a lot of what happens in these experiences is very, what, for lack of a better word, you can only describe as telepathic, or like just instinctual. I don't really know any other way to describe it. I enter into the experienced psychonauts know what I'm talking about, and they'll tell you, but like I just enter into the center of this room, and without actually hearing an audible voice, it's almost like I receive this command, look up. And so I just instinctively look straight up, and the ceiling of this room is basically a mirror of the room that I'm in. So I'm looking up, and that mirror, that room that I'm in, is inverted and looking down at me. And such being the case, you would think that when I look up, what I would see is a reflection of me looking back down at me. That's not what was there. What was there was an entity made of just pure white light. Also, sitting in the lotus position, just like I am, its head turned upwards to look down at me as I'm looking up at it, and it was emulating my movements. I would turn my head this way and turn my head this way, like, whoa. And it would turn its head along with mine. It was the light that it was made out of was so bright that it didn't have a lot of detail to its form. It was clearly humanoid in form, but it was like a silhouette because the light was so bright. You couldn't make out details of like a face. In fact, it was actually completely faceless as far as looking at the face goes, but you couldn't make out a lot of shadow to see like fingers or anything like that. But I did notice its hair was very much like, at first it looked like, I guess what you might describe as dreadlocks. Very much like also certain aliens you might have seen in Star Wars, where they have those tentacle type of hair that are real thick and go backwards. But as I'm sitting there staring at it for long enough, I could see the ends of its hair kind of come up and notice that this entity of white light is like a gorgon. It's like Medusa. These tentacles are actually serpents made of white light. And so I'm staring at this thing in amazement and noticing how it's emulating all my movements and stuff. And it's almost like when I gave in to the implication, there was this feeling of recognition and remembrance. I'm like, it's mirroring me because it is me. And boom, it's like some light bulb went off inside, and I recognized this entity. And it was feminine. And it was what we would, as humans, would describe as my Jungian anima to my animus, or perhaps my shadow self, like the yin to my yang, the feminine to my masculine, the ethereal to my corporeal. It was the other part of me that exists in this other plane, whatever it is, this other dimension. Perhaps it's just purely mental world. Maybe it's some other layer to reality, to the matrix we live in, or whatever. But it was unreal. It was the first time I'd ever experienced on psychedelics this just sudden, like someone opened a gate that was on my memory that I didn't even know was there. And now it's like, I remember you. I remember us. You are me. I am you. You're that part of me that's in that world. And I'm this part of you that's in this world. You are experiencing this world through me. And I'm experiencing that world through you. And somewhere along the way, we just kind of lost track of that and kind of forgot it. But there's not even a we to be referenced here. It's just, it's me. There was definitely a very, like, a sense of connection. I might say a sense of love. I know a lot of people report getting a very, very strong sense of love with entities on DMT. This wasn't so much a sense of love as it was like a sense of like, I don't even know what to describe it as, other than like maybe urgency. Not even urgency, like you've got to get back on track. Like, okay, yeah, you remember who I am, and you feel all these feelings and whatnot. And that's good and great and all, but like, stay focused. You've got to get back on track. And once I like mentally acknowledged that, on its faceless face, a mouth finally opened up. And when it opened its mouth, inside of that mouth, it had cobra fangs, also made of white light. And then out of this mouth shot a tongue. And it just kept elongating and elongating. And it shot out at a very rapid speed. And this tongue was also a serpent made of white light. And so this serpent tongue of white light shot out of the mouth of my otherworldly self, my reflection in that other dimension, and it shot down and went into my mouth of this self that was sitting in the DMT corridor that I was in. This human-looking self, this avatar, whatever you want to call it. So it opens its mouth, and then naturally, I instinctively, almost uncontrollably, open my mouth because, again, we're reflections of each other, mirror images of each other. It sticks out its tongue, and bam, that serpent of light comes down into my mouth, wraps around my tongue, and then shoots not down my throat, but down my spine. And I could feel it. It was in no way painful. It was just this sense of like heat, warm heat, like comfortable heat, and vibrations, tingly vibrations, going down, all the way down my spine into, I guess, my sacrum. And I could feel it, like, because of the way it like kind of spiraled around my tongue as it went down, the energy, like there were pulses of energy coming down this serpent tongue and into my spine, and they were kind of spiraling as well. And because it was a serpent, after very, very shortly after entering into my spine, it started, waving the way a serpent does when it crawls. And as it's doing that, it kind of made my spine want to do this. So it was weird. It was like this uncontrollable, like, I don't know, yoga gesture that my body sort of apparently started to go into, because my girlfriend and brother told me, as they were observing me while I was having this trip, they were observing me here in the sober world, and they said I actually started doing that. I was looking up and I stuck my tongue out and I just started like gyrating my spine like I was a serpent or something, as I'm receiving this energy that's coming from this other me down into this me, I guess. And it's surging down my spine. I know for a lot of you yoga buffs out there, what I'm describing sounds very similar to like a Kundalini experience, a Kundalini awakening. But from what I've read about Kundalini, this doesn't quite match up. There are overlapping elements, but I'm not like on some high horse here saying like, I've had a Kundalini awakening. I don't think that's what this was, though I do think there are a lot of overlapping elements. So perhaps there's something similar is at play here, but yeah, so its tongue, which is a serpent of light, is going down my spine and just giving me these surges of energy. And I don't know what purpose, if any, this served, but it was a very ecstatic type of experience. And it did that for a few minutes and then recoiled the serpent out of me back up into its own mouth. Its mouth closed, and so I instinctively closed mine, and then it turned its head forward, and so I did so down here. And again, I was just a point of vision, a point of perception without a body anymore. And that point of perception that I was started to float back down through the corridor, the exact same corridor that I just came out of, but backwards. Like instead of turning around and going out of it forwards, I was floating through it backwards so that the hallways were passing by me this way instead of this way. And what was significant was, remember the lotus flowers that I said were decorating the walls that previously had been closed? Now they were opened as I'm floating down this corridor, and that made a very significant impression on me. I remember seeing that, and they were glowing. I mean, of course they were glowing because they were made out of like kind of neon, almost like fluorescent light bulbs, you know, neon outlines of light. But they were brighter, and like kind of in the center of them, it was glowing. And I just remember the feeling I had, like seeing that. There was some kind of impression I was supposed to take away from that, like, oh wow, okay, something significant just happened here. Like before going into this, these lotus blossoms were closed and now they're open, which I think correlates with something happening in here. Something was closed before this experience and now it's open. And so I float all the way back down this corridor, back to the position that I started when I first closed my eyes in this trip. And so instinctively, when I got to that point, I opened my eyes and boom, that's it. It was all over. I opened my eyes and everything was completely back to normal. I felt completely sober again. There was my ex-girlfriend and brother staring at me with, you know, cheesy smiles on their face. And that was that. So yeah, that was a good experience. I wish I could say the same of the two following DMT experiences that I would later have, but like I said, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But yeah, that was something else. That was the beginning, I would say, the real beginning of my journey down the rabbit hole, as my subsequent psychedelic experiences after this point would always be delivering to me a message. Every one of them, every single one of them that I had after that DMT experience was in fact significant in constructing my worldview and my views on reality and of myself and my place in it, if there even is one. Yeah, so that was where the real journey started. And I guess that's all I have to say about it. Thank you.